who's making the NBA playoffs this year? But when we look at the Eastern Conference and we look at the Western Conference, what we're going to see, not much change in the East, but a whole lot of changes in the West. So first, let's just start with the easy one, and that is the East. Not much is going to change as far as the East is concerned, as far as who's going to make the playoffs, simply because strength of schedule and where teams are already placed. Now, there is one caveat that could disrupt the entire thing, and that would be injuries. So let's say Giannis' injury is bigger than it already looks. Then the likelihood of the Bucks staying in or around that 4 or 5 spot, it's not really going to change all that much. But they'll still make the playoffs. Now, the biggest change that we could possibly see within the Eastern Conference is not whether or not these teams make it to the playoffs, but where they end up in the playoffs. I'm putting money on the fact that the New York Knicks will be the number 2 team ranked on the Eastern Conference. The main reason why I'm saying this is simply because the New York Knicks has the easiest schedule remaining in the NBA, whereas the Boston Celtics, their schedule is much harder than the Knicks' schedule. The Cleveland Cavaliers also have one of the weakest remaining schedules for the rest of the season. So I don't think that they're going to change from their position. They will stay at number 1, but I do think that the New York Knicks will have the number 2 slot and the Boston Celtics will most likely have the number 3 spot. You could see a little interplay between Atlanta, the Magic, Pistons, and the Bucks relative to whether or not Giannis' injury really takes toll. And of course, if there's any other injuries that come about throughout the rest of this season. Now, where we may see a little bit of change, but highly unlikely, is that grouping between the Magic, Hawks, Heat, Knicks, Bulls, and the 76ers. Although I'm not going to give a lot of credibility to the fact that the 76ers may be able to get into the play-in, it's highly unlikely. Unfortunately, Embiid has a history of injuries in the latter half of the season, as well as playoff P is just really podcast P at this point. So I doubt very seriously if the 76ers actually make it into the play-in. I think the play-in is going to remain relatively the same teams. We're looking at the Magic, the Hawks, the Heat, and the Bulls. The only things that I think will be different is that the Hawks will switch places with the Magic. The Hawks do have a slightly more difficult schedule than the Magic, but with the injuries that have been suffered by the Magics here and often, especially with Banchero, and the new players that are coming in for the Hawks, which should make them a healthier and better team, especially with Nang being someone that Trey can kick out to, I think there's a good chance that the Hawks and the Magic will change places. And they have a game tonight. They'll probably change places tonight. It's still possible that the Detroit Pistons may actually slip into the play-in, and either the Magic or the Hawks will rise to the 6th spot. But for the most part, the teams that are listed right now in the East are relatively going to stay in the playoff, barring any major injuries. The other teams, they're in the lottery. Philly, you're in the lottery. Brooklyn, lottery. Toronto, you have the hardest schedule remaining. You're in the lottery. Hornets and Wizards, hopefully you get the first or the second pick. Now, when we look at the West Coast, this is where some rumbling can happen. I am not a Lakers fan, but it is more than likely that the Lakers may end up in the 3rd spot. I don't think that they'll be able to reach the 1st or the 2nd spot. I think that the Thunder and the Grizzlies, maintaining their health, are going to remain the top 2 teams in the West. But with the Nuggets and the Rockets, and especially the Rockets having a more difficult schedule than the remaining teams in the West, the Lakers have a really good chance of going up to the 4th spot and even the 3rd spot. Denver's schedule is relatively rough as well. Now, where we're going to see some other changes, though, is with the Dallas Mavericks. That's where a major change is going to happen. I don't think the Warriors are going to make that much of a change. I think they'll remain a play-in team, but it's very possible that the Dallas Mavericks, if they can maintain the health and, well, at first, get AD healthy, get Derek Lively healthy, if those 2 players can get healthy, it is very plausible that the Dallas Mavericks may end up in the 5th or 6th spot. That will change the complexity of the game. Now, with the Timberwolves, with their injury and the way that they've been playing, it's most likely that they will remain a play-in team. They could slip up past the Clippers, but it's more than likely that they're not, and they're going to remain in the play-in. The Kings, you're in the play-in. Warriors, you're staying in the play-ins. But the Dallas Mavericks has a chance to reshuffle the deck and get to that sixth spot, especially with the Rockets. They're going to drop down to about the sixth or the seventh spot, and possibly even the eighth spot. But that is only because of toughness of schedule. And so these other teams have a weaker schedule that they get to play for the remaining of the season. So it's most likely that the teams that are in there are going to stay in there. Now, the dark horse of the West will be the Phoenix Suns. Now, although the Phoenix Suns has been recently showcasing Bobo, and y'all know I'm a Bobo fan, it is possible that the Suns could either step over the Warriors or step over the Kings and end up in the play-in. I don't think, and it is virtually almost impossible, that they're going to make it into the the sixth or fifth spot. That's not going to happen. they're not about to have that type of resurgence. That would have to be Bobo starts balling out and Beal has to come in and start balling out and they play some amazing defense. That's not going to happen. The Suns do have a great chance of moving into the 10th or ninth spot, therefore knocking out either the Kings or the Warriors. And I think they have a better chance of knocking the Kings out instead of knocking the Warriors out. So in the play-in is most likely you're going to see the Timberwolves, the Kings, the Warriors, and the Suns. Those are the teams vying for this play-in. I honestly believe that the Mavericks are going to move up into either that sixth or fifth spot relative to the Rockets moving down to the sixth spot. And those are my playoff predictions. Now, we'll see what happens when the playoffs get ready to start, and I'll tell you who's going to win, because that is going to be simply based on matchups. It is not going to be based on strength of schedule or strength of the team. It is all about matchups when we get into the playoffs. But for right now, that's where I would hang my hat. But what do you guys think? Smoke, stogies, and hoops? Holla at your boy.